Hello everyone, I'm Brofi1322 and this video serves as an update to my fastest fully upgraded cars series where I take all vehicles in GTA 5 around a circuit to find the best to use for racing. If you want to know how all vehicles perform in a variety of different classes and formats, check the annotation on the screen or the link in the description for the full playlist of videos, and of course feel free to subscribe for future updates. But otherwise, let's get straight into seeing how the vehicles from the Lowriders update compare to their counterparts, and first up we've got the Voodoo Custom. Now when a vehicle is turned into a Lowrider, it gets that custom mark at the end of its name. That's how you distinguish between the Lowrider version of the vehicle and the regular version of the vehicle. And when the Voodoo is turned into a Lowrider, when it's turned into the Voodoo Custom at Benny's shop, it does get an increase for acceleration and with braking as well, which means that ultimately it gets half a second quicker lap time over the regular Voodoo. It's not that much, but every little helps, especially for something as slow as the Voodoo. Now in 7th place we've got the Moonbeam. This is the regular Moonbeam that hasn't been turned into a Lowrider at this point, but obviously as with all of these vehicles it does have all of the performance upgrades, and for some bizarre reason this is a muscle car. I don't quite know how Rockstar gets the idea that this is a muscle car, but it's in the muscle cars class and it's only the 24th best. It's in 1 minute 21, nothing special, but I've really given up trying to figure out Rockstar and how they classify these vehicles at this point after what we saw with the Blister Compact. Now in 6th place we've got the Chino Custom. When the Chino's turned into a Lowrider, it loses a tiny little bit of traction, but it's barely noticeable, and it gains a tiny bit in terms of acceleration. Again, not a lot, but it does mean that the Chino Custom is about 1/10 of a second quicker than the regular Chino. But again, with the muscle cars class, the Chino is way off the pace, as is the Chino Custom. They're not going to be setting the world alight in terms of lap times. Next up, we've got the Moonbeam Custom. Now, the only difference between this and the regular version of the Moonbeam is that when it's turned into a Lowrider, when it's turned into the Moonbeam Custom, it gets an extra modification available to it, which is very important, and it's that rear tyre, that spare tyre on the back. That, just like with what we saw with the Dubster, that increases traction just like a spoiler, like any spoiler, allows you to corner better and ultimately allows you to get a much quicker lap time. Now, next up we've got the Faction, and there's no car that I could say that I've probably driven that handles worse than this. The turning physics seem to be all completely broken on it. It seems to be very difficult to get it around the corner, and the worst thing about it is that it can't go over any bump whatsoever, any curb. If you take this out for 5 laps, I can guarantee that you'll flip it over at least once, just driving normally. As soon as you hit any curb, it will flip over. It's absolutely horrific to drive. A 1 minute 16 lap time is nothing special at all, and I just couldn't recommend it to anybody. It's just horrific. So in 3rd place, we're into the top 3 for this DLC. We've got the Primo Custom. This is the only Lowrider that isn't a muscle car, and it's the 5th best sedan in the game. But ultimately it's basically exactly the same as the regular Primo. There's no difference between it in terms of the lap time that it gets, in terms of the performance that it gets, and in terms of the game code as well. It's exactly the same as the regular Primo when it's turned into a Lowrider, when it becomes the Primo Custom. So nothing really that special about it, but ultimately, that's the lap time that it gets, and it's the 3rd best for this DLC. Now 2nd place we've got the Faction Custom. So you would imagine after what I've just said about the regular Faction that this would be horrible as well, but surprisingly when this is turned into a Lowrider and it's turned into the Faction Custom, all of those problems that I talked about with going over curbs magically go away, and it becomes quite an interesting car to drive, to be honest. A 1 minute 13.3 is almost 3 seconds per lap quicker than what the Faction got regularly, but this hasn't had any increases in performance. It doesn't get a benefit to acceleration or braking like we saw with the Voodoo. It doesn't get any extra modifications to increase traction like we saw with the Moonbeam. It's just the fact that you can have so much more confidence in what you're doing with this car and drive it to the absolute limit and not be scared of hitting a curb wrong, and you can actually get it around the track, honestly. So yeah, big difference between those two. But in 1st place for this DLC is the Buccaneer Custom. This is exactly the same as the regular Buccaneer, just like what we saw with the Primo being exactly the same as the Primo Custom. This again is exactly the same as the regular Buccaneer. No performance differences from fully upgrading it when it's the regular Buccaneer to fully upgrading it when it's turned into a Lowrider at Benny's shop. no difference between them. 1 minute 13.2. You can go back and check the muscle cars video if you want to check those lap times are the same, but they're almost identical. And yeah, it's the 14th best muscle car. It's obviously not on the pace of the top muscle cars that we all know already, but it's not too bad to drive, and it's very, very close between this and the Faction Custom as well. It's interesting, you know, this DLC has never really been about performance, in my opinion. I don't really think that any of us probably expected any of these cars to be topping their respective classes. It would have been nice to see some performance increases, but ultimately most of the cars here, apart from, you know, the odd strange characteristics like the extra modification available on the Moonbeam, or the very strange way that the Faction goes over curbs once it's upgraded, they're all exactly the same, you know. Making a car into a lowrider, turning it into the custom version of the car, doesn't really impact performance all that much. It's all about what you can do with the car in terms of modifications. And it also must be remembered that we've only seen 2 brand new cars in this DLC. The other 4 that can be turned into lowriders have been in the game for a while, and I've already tested them in previous videos. You know, they just now have the ability to become lowriders and get all those extra modifications. So we've only seen 2 brand new vehicles, so that's why you've seen 8 vehicles in total in this video. But let me know all your thoughts down below. You know, let me know what you think about this. I will be doing a bigger analysis and discussion video like I always do after a DLC drops. That will be out in a few days, where I talk more about all of this and about the extra features that we've seen from this DLC as well. But ultimately, in terms of performance, there's not really a lot to write home about from this DLC and from the cars that we've seen. So yeah, let me know all your thoughts down below. Feel free to subscribe for future updates if you're at all interested. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.